You're in the temple of the rants, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Wada Things, who says, rant about the rant hole and how history shows you likely won't keep this up past, like, June. Then again, it might be making you so much money that you gotta keep doing it. I mean, for at least right now, I'm gonna keep doing it because, yes, it makes me a fuckload of money, and it's good in multiple ways, because not only do I make a lot of money through Patreon, but also through the ad revenue of the videos themselves. Some of them get bigger than others, you know, and it's pretty fun. I mean, I wish I didn't find myself in a position where every month I've just been so, like, swamped with other shit going on that I end up having to race through all these and release them all at once at the end of the month. But it's also kind of hard to just do a few a day. You know, it's easier to just get into, like, a sort of fugue state and power through them all. I just, you know, would prefer to do that maybe earlier in the month and then release them over the course of it instead of always having to do it at the last minute. But, yeah. Will this thing keep up forever? Probably not. I mean, I don't see myself doing this, 95 rants every single month, especially because we're all going to run out of ideas. Like, eventually, people are going to have exhausted as many rants as they wanted, or just not have anything really interesting to ask me about, or I'll have just spoken about everything that anybody could think of, and that's natural. And eventually I'm going to raise the price of these. I might even do it next month just to reduce the number of them, because it is kind of out of hand, and it's a lot to do. But I want to address the sort of way that this was phrased, because you say you likely won't keep this up past, like, June, as though it were a bad thing. I don't initiate any projects with the expectation that they will go on forever, or that they will even reach a state of, what might seem like completion, because that's not interesting to me. Like, I'm not interested in this idea of, like, doing the same thing past the sort of the point where it is engaging, there's a phrase that Best Guy Ever uses sometimes, where he'll say that we've sort of exhausted the intellectual content of a show. Because a lot of shows, they really pack most of the message, most of the intrigue into the concept, into just the first episode. And beyond that point, it's sort of just a foregone conclusion that the story has to go a certain way until it has reached the end. And in order to really enjoy a show, you have to be interested in watching that play out. For me, stories tend to be at their most interesting at the very beginning. Like, I want to know the intellectual content of every piece that's being created. I want to know the general idea of what it's about. But if the experience of going along and following that train of thought to the end isn't engaging in and of itself, then I'm probably not going to, to want to participate all the way through. If I think of a show like Sangatsu no Lion, which I recently, was considering like one of my favorite anime of all time, possibly even my number one, that show, the intellectual content of it is basically just life happening, right? It's just, let's go down every random avenue that life takes us with these characters, which is extremely broad. And because the experience of watching the show is always engaging, because it's constantly having new ideas, it's constantly featuring new characters, having different arcs, going down different thematic and intellectual pathways, because again, it's just life happening. The core of the show is not simply to express one idea, but the point is to go in every direction. When you have a story like that, it's easy to follow through to the end, or as long as it's going to go, because it's not really just one thing. It's really everything. And when I look at my career, I don't think of it as a series of shows. I don't think of it as like, oh, now we're doing this show, and then that concludes, and then we're doing this show. I am the show. The show is the continuing thought of my, what I'm thinking about. All of it ties into each other. All of it is connected. You can't have any one piece without the other pieces. They don't make sense individually. You can get something out of it, but something like, say, Steins Gate Zero sucks or whatever. That's not a show in unto itself. It's an episode. It's an episode that's broken into pieces, kind of like, one of those two-part movies or whatever, where it's just too long to release as one movie, and be able to make the amount of money that's necessary to make something that long. But, like, it is just one chapter in, particularly with that one, the Otaku Hero's Journey, which is a story that, goes from the No Game No Life video into that, into the Log Horizon videos, but even that is just a part of a meta-narrative that's being added to constantly, where if you were watching, say, Gecko Estate Episode 5, that's talking about the new type revolution, that leads directly into it, and you're following this train of thought. And maybe some of those things are compartmentalized in such a way that is meant to, be consumable on its own so that you can get sort of a fulfilling experience out of just consuming that chunk. But the story is following Digibro through the thought process. And it's never complete. No individual video is complete because I'm always expanding on the idea. I'm always revisiting it. I'm always rethinking it. I'm always presenting it in a different way. And so if you follow the logical through line of, say, a video like Aesthetic is Narrative and then How Aesthetic, like, it's sort of a sequel, but at the same time, it's not as though you could just go from that video to the next video and have the full perspective on how we got here, because you can see the transition, you can see the gradient that's going between those. So when I get to a point with a video or series where I feel as though the intellectual content has already been fulfilled, where I feel like I've already done the thing, I've made the point, it's like I don't see any reason to continue down this road, It's like I'm producing an anime that, I have reached the point where I've exhausted all the unique ideas, and it's like, sure, we haven't seen the ending yet, but the ending is a foregone conclusion. We know where this is going. We know what it's supposed to end like, and I understand that there are a lot of people who really care about endings, who really care about, like, sticking the landing. I don't. I'm not somebody who completes most of the things I watch. Even things I love, I leave on hold for years. I never get around to the end. I don't really care about the ending in particular. Usually the endings are my least favorite parts of stories because they try too hard to, like, have something conclusive that feels, that feels like, oh, this is the end of a story, but it doesn't really, it's like not a story that needed to do that, I feel a lot of the time. So when I look at something like, say, my Log Horizon series, which is currently standing unfinished, I had started writing part 5. I wrote, like, probably half of it. And I got to a point where I'd kind of exhausted the intellectual content. I felt like I'd made the point. And while I did want to continue because I want people to, like, I want to take each part and say, here's why this part was also good, here's why this part was also good, I feel as though those parts are good in ways that I already explained. I already explained enough about what makes the show good, because in order for you to come to the conclusion that those parts weren't good, you had to have missed some of these things. You had to have not been watching the show the same way that I was from the beginning. Like, whatever you were getting out of it had to be different if this next arc, which does, in my opinion, the same things, didn't appeal to you. So rather than re-explain that stuff and, like, continue to belabor this point, I kind of reach a moment where I go, all right, I think I've pretty much made my point. I'm ready to move on because there are other things to, expend my intellectual curiosity on. And granted, it would be a lot easier to conclude these things just for the sake of satisfaction of the audience if I had a team, if it wasn't just me, if there was, I'm unwilling to be bored. I'm unwilling to go into the part of a project where it no longer interests me personally because this is the life I'm living. Like, this is my day-to-day. I don't want to do boring shit when I have 1,000 other ideas that are interesting to me that I'd rather jump to, So it's like, basically my projects go into a point where either they become unsustainable or I lose interest. And the way I see it, again, the show is me. The show is my life. The show is always ongoing as long as I'm making content. whether or not any individual series ends doesn't matter to me. And I understand how, for the audience, not everybody consumes my stuff this way. Not everybody's watching everything. Not everybody's following the whole train of thought, because the appeal to them is different than what it is for me. You know, the appeal for them is, I get to hear you talk about a show I care about, maybe reaffirm my opinions about things, but like, if you're someone who's picking and choosing which content of mine you consume, you're not really consuming the product I'm making in a way, or at least the product that I'm intending to make. You're, you know, customizing the experience to suit your own needs. And I respect that. Go ahead and do it that way. But, you know, I wouldn't expect, or you shouldn't expect me to capitulate to the way that you want to consume my content. I'm going to do it the way I like it to be, which is an ever-evolving, ever-branching out, ever, you know, following the train of thought into the thing that interests me next, and not just stopping because of the fact that this is the way that will be satisfying to certain people. You know, that, oh, well, some people are going to be mad if you don't finish the thing. I don't give a shit, because I won't be mad. I won't feel like I've lost anything. I'll feel like I gained freedom and the ability to do the next thing I want to do, you know? So, basically, fuck you!